So I will tell you in the next 10 minutes some about statistics of service mode versus visitor mode, because we are monitoring what is happening. So we are monitoring how much time is requested, how much time is allocated, at which instruments, at which telescopes. So, and we take since the start of Paranal, so I should say this is all for Paranal, for the VLT and VLTI at the moment, because you heard in LACIA there is at the moment only visitor mode. So these are some statistics I will provide you, where I show you first, so the requested time, we heard already, so there are about 900 proposals, and the request time for about 15,000 hours in total in the last years here. This is somehow saturated at the moment, and see already now here that most of the time is requested at the moment in service mode. But you will see the fractions later. So I should know that in these plots, in visitor mode, there are counted also some of the public surveys and the guaranteed time observations where we demand that this is visitor mode. So these are not only normal programs, but also some that are by demand scheduled in visitor mode. So this you saw also from Michael. So there are always, since long years, a number of new PIs per period, but if we split this into service mode and visitor mode, we see that this increase of service mode, as I will show in the next slide, is also reflected here. So we have a slight decrease since 8 years about in demand of new PIs in visitor mode. So less and less PIs are demanding, or new PIs are demanding actually the visitor mode. Okay, so why is this? So at the beginning, when the observatory started, we wanted to have more or less an even distribution of 50-50% between visitor mode and service mode, and this was indeed the case at the beginning. The time was requested half more or less. Nowadays we have a policy that at least 50% should be service mode, but we also aimed at a level of the visitor mode of the kind of 30% or something like this. But as you can see, the visitor mode, this is this time only for the normal programs, not the demanded visit. So the forced visitor mode, that it decreased now nearly to 15% or something like this. So more and more people want to have actually service mode, because they seem to like it, that you get your data, that you get good data. This is a trend that we didn't want, but that the users, you request, right? Okay, so we can then compare the requested time to the allocated time. Again, now in visitor mode, this is not the 15% level here, because there's GTO and public surveys here included. But what we try to do to follow this request also in the allocated time, so that what is requested is reflected also in the allocated time. So you can be sure if there's a certain percentage of visitor mode requested, it should be also reflected here. As you see already, this is a bit more here because of this GTO and public survey time. So this you can divide by each other, and that's what Francesca was showing, that already you see that the pressure factor is on average about 3, which means only 1/3 of the whole proposals will get actually the requested time, will get to the telescope and will get time allocated, and for some instruments it's even worse. Again, this deviation that it's seemingly low pressure factor of the visitor mode is again by this forced visitor mode in GTO and public surveys. Okay, so we can split this into, for example, requested time per telescope, because there are some typical telescopes, and I take now the UT1, UT4, UT3, where you can see how the time evolution of the requests. So there is at the very beginning, this was where the force 1 was, and later force 2. It was 50-50, but then people learned that this. The users learn that this works very good in service mode, and then there's always a high level of service mode, or here at UT4 as well. You see that people get more confidence in something like the service mode on UT4 with Symphony, for example. At UT3, there's an opposite trend. There was always a very high demand on visitor mode, because this was dominated on service mode, because it was dominated by VMOS. VMOS is a quite complicated instrument. But then we learned, in VMOS, and we show you in my last slide again, that we had many large programs in VMOS, because it's an extragalactic survey instrument, that there is a lot of carryover in the next period, and that sometimes the executions are not so efficient. So we forced in the last 2 or 3 years that the public surveys that were carried out in VMOS are on visitor mode, and they are indeed now finished next week, actually. They will be finished. And this was very efficient. This is one of the examples where visitor mode turned out to be more efficient than the large program carryover in service mode for some instruments. In VLT1, there was, people thought in VLTI, let's say, so VLTI, people thought at the beginning, oh yeah, let the people on parallel ESO do this, but then the instruments became such complicated, and there are so many specialists in the user community that they prefer to come actually to the instrument and run it themselves. And only when we had a big break and an improvement in the instruments, we are back now in the service mode. Okay, you can break this down also then in the special instruments. This is a very flashy, complicated plot, but so this is a number of hours of allocated time per instruments. I just highlight here somewhere where is a high demand. So we have our favorite instruments. We make always a rank list, who gets the most time, and among those were always the fourth instrument, traditionally X shooter, UVS, VMOS because of the large request in general, and now recently Muse had taken off and is overtaking nearly X shooter, and of course as a highest demanded and then also allocated instrument. Okay, so once going to service mode, you heard already from Francesca, you have these A-ranked programs, you have these B-ranked programs and C-ranked programs. So for the A-ranked programs, which has the highest scientific evaluation of the OPC, we allocate more or less, as you can see here, not nearly half of the service mode time, but we guarantee more or less that these programs will be taken or will be carried over if not all observation plots are taken in one period. But then you have a similar amount of B-rank programs that might have the same conditions, and you have then another allocation of the filler programs. Note here that visitor mode is basically always A rank because you go to the telescope and will get time if you are not weathered out. Okay, bear this in mind because so we can also have a look how long are these typical programs in service mode, and on average they are more or less 10 hours. There's a slight trend, maybe a little decrease. This is the same for A and B ranked. Only the filler programs, they ask for more. So if you have a bad seeing program or you can observe in close, you normally want to fill the parameter space when there is bad weather, and you can apply for a lot of targets and they might be taken. So this is rather short because we, in our call for proposals, you might remember the large programs start with 100 hours or more. But normal programs can be, in principle, 99 hours long. But people ask for 10 hours only, on average. So especially in this call for proposals, we made a statement here that we encourage you, the community, to submit proposals for normal programs making use of the full allowed range of the total time. So, and we will take care, again, as we do for other programs, that what is demanded will be also scheduled. And the OPC should take care of to give good ranks to all kinds of programs, not only short programs. Okay, so you can split this again in instruments, but it's not so important. So one last slide on the service mode. So you have this A, B, and C ranked runs. So for the A ranked runs, we are nearly at 90% that they are really finished and fulfilled. So you will get your data. But as you can see, for the B and C ranked programs, this is at a 50% level. So if you end up in service mode in a B or C ranked, you have a chance of 50% on average to get, or half of your data, let's say. Or some programs get nothing and other get 100% or something like this. So you have to be aware of this. This is one of the disadvantages of the service mode. But if you write a very, very good proposal, you should hopefully end up always here. Okay. So the visitor, now going to the visitor mode. So how many nights do we schedule? This is a small increase in the last years, but this is again because we had a lot of new instruments coming to the telescope, so a lot of guaranteed time observations, and also we're running public surveys like in Flames and VMOS that pushed this number a little bit. They are typical visitor mode instruments. Again, there is a split into where all the visitor mode time the nights go into. And then you see at the beginning it was, of course, the force instruments and UVs. A lot of people like to go to UVs. Then this is X shooter here at the end. So you can have later, when you have this plot, you can have a closer look to it. But how long is a typical visitor mode run? For how long, on average, go actually users to Paranal? And this is astonishingly also very short. So it's on average only 1.5 nights that people ask for. And again here, it's the same call. We don't force this. This is what is demanded from the users, what is requested, and encourage you only. So the 100 hour or 99 hours would be 10 nights. So in principle, you can ask for visitor mode of 5, 6, 7, 8 nights, but in principle, the average is only 1.5 night. So this is what you think now, but we, yeah, but this is the perception the users got, yeah. This is the perception the users got, but maybe Nando will tell you in the next talk that in principle, we want to educate also the OPC not to think like this, that you should apply for what you need for your science case, okay? That's all what I say. If you need 5 nights, you need 5 nights, okay? Okay, so there are some of the instruments that have a little bit longer times in general are those of flames, force, okay, to close the loop, so there is some learning curve of how the community reacts to requested time per instrument. That's what you say probably. No, this is a short proposal, but I take once more some example of some instruments, what people learned. So at the beginning, force, everybody wanted to go to the telescope and 50-50. So there was a lot of visitor mode and everyone wanted to have the experience once to observe with even a standard instrument, let's say nowadays standard instrument. And then they knew that this is a good instrument and they asked for more and more service, more time in this instrument. NARCO, on contrary, was always an instrument that is complicated, has very different modes, and probably you need some real-time decisions there. And there was always the tendency, also because of some special teams that use it very much here in the Galactic Center, that want to have control of the observation and make real-time decisions. This was only a 50-50 instrument. VMOS was always very high in service mode demand, except when we invented these public surveys here. You see that impact. And the VLTI story is that at the beginning there was quite some service mode, but then people wanted to have also the control until here, and then it went back to high demand and service mode. So, okay, what can we take away from this whole lecture about service mode with visitor mode? So as you have seen with Francesca and my conclusion, so the service mode with visitor both have disadvantages and advantages. You should really thoroughly analyze your science goals, what you have, what would serve best your science goals. Maybe also consider your situation in the PhD thesis. Also young people encouraged to really take the experience once to visitor mode. We don't ask anymore so much for a real justification why you want to go to visitor mode. If it is well justified, try it. Why not? So the main advantage of service mode, you get the required data quality, of course, but the main disadvantage, if you end up in BC rank, you might not get data at all, maybe. The main advantage of visitor mode, you really decide changes in the observing strategy and accuracy of data quality live on the mountain. So yeah, you can decide how many calibrations you take. If you want a better flat field, you can decide this and take twilight flats or whatever you need. Main disadvantage, you might suffer from bad weather, of course. In both cases, what I try to emphasize, apply for as much time as you need for your science goals, not just hearing, oh, shorter programs have better chances. Long normal programs are encouraged. If you don't get what you were expecting, so if you fail to get a proposal, if you fail to get time at all, think about if your science college cannot be done with the archive. There are plenty data there. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Question for Francesca or Michael? Yes.
You press all the time on the bad weather. How often it happens that in Chile is bad weather in terms of number of nights per year, for example?
Actually, 10 to 12%. Yeah, well, this is the average, but you have also variation now in February, March. Actually, is a bad time because of the Bolivian winter coming down. So if your target are always in February, March, you might have a worse luck than in other months. So I think we have the statistic also in the call for proposals, where you can see when there is the better months. So now, okay, visitor mode, I don't know what is the success rate. They are weathered out also by 10%. So in 9 of 10 cases, you get all your data and good data normally. And yeah, even better than you expect, maybe you can get more out of it.
Other question? Our question online? Seems not. So let's thank Francesca and Michael again.